Today, for the next, I guess, 20 minutes of your life, you are going to learn a lot about the travel industry and how to market it. I'm Carrie Seifer. I'm with GWI, Market Research on Demand.
And I'm Meg Mitchell. I'm the creative director at United Airlines.
And I'm Lauren Smith, executive creative director at 72andSunny.
See why we're going to talk about travel? See. So here's what I would say to kick things off. As a market research company, you probably don't need me to tell you that travel is back to pre-pandemic rates because you got on a plane and you sat through an airport and I bet it was overbooked and all that fun stuff.
Not on United, though.
Not on United.
You had an excellent travel experience on United.
Sailing. I'll tell you two things, though, that I thought you might find interesting from the travel research. Then I'll hand it over to our expert, which is, one, there's an increase in what they call bleisure, which is business and leisure, which feels super appropriate because you are in Cannes. Like, you're not in New Jersey, people. Nothing against New Jersey. I actually live in New York. But so a lot of bleisure is up. And so a lot more people kind of combining the two together to find a way to live their lives. And then the other thing that I think is really interesting is that when we surveyed people and asked what they want to see from airlines, we used to see safety pop to the top every single time. It was the first answer. And now it's probably deemed table stakes because now we see things like, I want my airline to be bold, and sustainability is becoming increasingly important to me. And so I wonder what you're seeing. Just maybe start with travel in general, and then we'll dig into some of how those insights inform some of your campaigns.
So I would say the bleisure trend for sure started in 2022. We started to see that as travel started to rebound. And it really eliminated the idea of a weekend. So flights, like we used to have a pattern where there'd be an increase in traffic on Friday and then Sunday or Monday. And that doesn't exist anymore. And I think that is probably here to stay as people look to extend their weekends and they can work remote. The other thing that we've been seeing, and then I'll get to the other part that you touched on in a bit, are just the uniqueness of destinations. Like, we have launched routes since the pandemic to Dubai. We just announced Marrakesh. We're flying to places like Mallorca and Tenerife, and people are really interested in trying new destinations. I don't know if you want to speak to any of that.
Do we fly to Marrakesh? Heck yes.
Oh, heck yes. That's the...
No, I mean, no. Well, I'm more interested in sustainability.
Yeah. No, that is interesting. Same. A lot of really interesting destinations where people want to go. Do you think that is a post-pandemic thing, or are people just getting more interested in more uniqueness?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of, I want to go someplace before it becomes trendy. We started to do some of this pre-pandemic, and then I think just with the pent-up demand during the pandemic, it was like people were just excited to get out again. And so, yeah, it's been really exciting to launch routes like that.
Yeah. I think we're also seeing a lot of people complain through the research about places being overly touristy,
yes.
and they actually want a non-touristy experience,
yes.
Which sometimes means friction, but I think people are kind of like, once I get there, I'm okay with a little bit of friction and discovery to explore.
Yeah. And then the other trend that's been interesting too is shoulder season. So I think for a lot of people, it used to just be summer break, winter break, spring break. And because you can work remote, we're seeing a lot more travel and like patterns that are a little bit different in September and October. And that's an amazing way to beat the crowds.
Interesting. So that's a lot of what's going on with travel in general. For United specifically, let's talk about some of your campaigns. That I want to hear the process and what it was like in boardrooms to try and sell Grouch, your chief trash officer. And I want to hear the background, though. How did that even come to be?
Yeah, I can start. I'll start with a little bit of the background, I think, and then you can talk about how Grouch came to be. But I'm going to back up a little bit to right before the pandemic. We were going to attempt to launch a new brand campaign for United. It had been a really long time since United did do that. The brand, I think probably had we need more people to like us. I'll just say that. If that's the metric that you're going to measure, we really needed more people to like us and to want to choose us. And so we went out and we did some research, and there are two quotes that I love to use when I talk about the state of sort of where United was, and then we'll be able to jump forward to sustainability and the grouch. One person described us as an uncle who has never tried sushi. And then another person described us, and I don't know why it's another uncle reference, as an uncle who would throw a party at a country club, but it was a cash bar. And so that was sort of how people saw us. So we had a lot of work to do. So we actually took advantage of the time during the pandemic when people weren't flying, and we saw people weren't in the clubs, and so we redid them all. And we eliminated change fees because at the time people needed to be able to freely change their flight, and they needed flexibility. That is also the time where we decided to go net zero by 2050. And so we had a new CEO come in. His name is Scott Kirby. He cares more about the environment than any human I think I have ever met. And he gets the science behind it. Like he is in it. He doesn't just talk about it. So I feel like all of us have a little bit of a environmental degree after working with him. But he made that bold claim. And he said, we're not going to do it without, or we're not going to do it with carbon offsets. So we're not going to go out and just buy a bunch of carbon offsets like a bunch of other companies can do. We need to attack the emissions at their source. And that means investing in more sustainable aviation fuel production. Like, how the hell do you explain sustainable aviation fuel production? So, like, it's fuel that's made from trash, right? Which was this key insight. So Lauren and I are talking.
Waste byproducts.
Yes, thank you, right? And agricultural slop and all sorts of stuff that's just like, oh my God, and the legal disclaimers on it. So we really needed a way to be able to tell people about our initiative and how we're leading the way with what this is, but in a way that was like really easy to understand. And so enter the grouch.
Yeah, I also might just back up for a second. I'm not sure if there's any agency folks in the audience, but I feel like whenever you work on a brand, there's always those sort of back of the idea decks that are usually a little unrealistic, might show that you don't understand a brand. And there are things like, oh, there's a problem with diversity in the flight deck, so let's start a flight school. You know what I mean? But junior creatives not knowing how difficult it is to start a flight school, or oh, there's a problem with not having enough sustainable aviation fuel. Let's start a sustainable aviation fuel fund. And I think the one of the most exciting things about working on United is that actually they're already doing all of those things, and it's our job to just make that understandable and relatable and really exciting to the customer, to the audience. So they have a flight school that's training the next generation of elite pilots, and they started a sustainable aviation fuel fund, and then we just get to do the fun stuff, which is talk about it. We also, Meg actually started in United on the social team, and when we first started working with United, we would do these like bi-weekly social ideas where we would go, what if we could do this, and what if we could do this, and try to think a little bit more loose and liberally with our ideas and be less precious. And one of those ideas was, why don't we have Oscar the Grouch do a cameo as a United employee as the chief trash officer? And I think, there's these times when you are looking through decks and you're trying to decide what's good and what's not. And universally, everyone was like, this is a really, really big idea, not something that we should do a one-off social thing. And so we came to United with it. And I think...
Yeah, we hired Oscar.
So
literally,
that sounds alcohol fueled. So what if?
Right. What if we hire a puppet?
Here's a crazy idea.
No, I mean, I will say, like, whenever you work in advertising, you do sort of stuff around green energy. There's a lot of, I don't want to go so far to say greenwashing, but it tends to be quite lofty, and it tends to be really serious, and it's about the end of the world, or how we need to take this seriously, or about your personal responsibility to it as a consumer. And there's something really exciting and refreshing about having a puppet. Don't call him a Muppet; he's a puppet. Yeah. Having a puppet who loves trash tell the world about all the good in garbage, and it's a really refreshing and interesting take in that sphere.
So I'll bet this idea was sitting inside this beautiful deck, and you had all this research, and you walked in, and there's a room full of people, and there's probably at least one that's like, no. Like, did you have naysayers, or did everyone get it right away? And if there was naysayers, how'd you overcome it? Because sometimes creative ideas are so hard to sell.
I know. It sounds too easy to be like, no. We didn't. right?
Everyone got it right away.
Dana, who works with Maggot United, was like, I know someone at Sesame. Maybe I'll just text them.
She knows the guy that plays Cookie Monster, and so texted him, and then that started the conversation with Sesame Street. So it was fast and it was easy. Not everything is. This one was.
Yeah.
I think
Good
the hardest
ideas.
part was Sesame is pretty rigorous about the partners with which it works, and United had to do a lot of diligence to basically like show the receipts on the efforts they were doing towards sustainability and multiple other things in order to actually just even be it was probably the most difficult part of the partnership. And then once we were all partnered, like, it's been wonderful.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I'll say is, like, as a client group, like United, they're just ambitious clients who don't think about things in a, like a traditional sense. Like this, I feel like almost every person at United is like, yes, that's an interesting idea. Let's go chase it. Let's make it happen. And I think that's what makes us good partners. Like 72andSunny, we're like, we want to make things happen. I see like Laura Schulzen back there. We like to call ourselves possibility makers. Like that's just what we do.
It's also, it's so interesting. We'll talk about the relationship in a minute, but if people sort of feel safe to bring up ideas like the Grouch and they see a response like that, they'll bring more good ideas.
Yeah.
Like I was with the client earlier, and we were trying to like fix some relationship between the client and the agency, and it's like, well, stop making them afraid. Stop making them afraid, and maybe they'll bring you new, cool, fun ideas. But I could see they were making the agency so afraid. I was like, yeah, I wouldn't bring you a good idea either because you would fire me. So it's just interesting. But we'll talk about that in a minute. What about anecdotally the female pilot program? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was one of the other, I would say, big moves that the company made during the pandemic. And that's like the beauty of working on advertising and social at United is that the company itself was doing really interesting, positive, sort of game-changing things, and we just had to figure out how to tell more people about it. So we didn't have to go out and invent something or do anything for the sake of getting attention or for the sake of marketing. And so there's a pilot shortage, and I think we were one of the first airlines to acknowledge it. And there's also a real diversity problem in the flight deck. And so if you think about pilots, I think that 1% are women of color, 7% are women, and 90%, that doesn't add up to 100, so there's something there. But, I'm in advertising. But anyways, like 90% are white men. And so there was a real opportunity for us to solve a business challenge, which was we need more pilots. But while we're doing that, why don't we open the aperture and open the pipeline so that more people have the possibility or even think about becoming pilots? Because a lot of times pilots, like the pipeline exists from the military and like a few very specific schools. And so a big part of opening this flight school is to be able to recruit people from all walks of life. And so we did that. And so United started Aviate Academy, which is our own flight school in Arizona. And then we had the incredible opportunity to be able to tell that story and make a film about it.
Is it working?
It is. Yeah, it's working. There is a massive wait list to actually get into the school, and the first graduating class was 80% women and people of color.
That's incredible. Congrats. It is interesting that it sounds like one of the things that you guys do well is you market off of, you really observe the business and find the good things to market about the business. And if you look and we're inside of a good business, you'll find plenty. It'll be more of an exercise in curation. So that's so great. So let's talk about you two. Well, let's talk about your relationship a little bit. One of the things you said that to the bone was the way that you guys talk about inside of 72andSunny, how you give feedback. But I don't want to say it. I want you to say the beautiful line, which is,
being hard on the work and kind to each other. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Isn't that a great way to give feedback? It's such a good reminder. Give feedback about the work, but you can do it in a kind way. Mm-hmm. And I think also this sort of next generation sometimes is struggling to get feedback. And I think that's a great way in, which is it's just about the work. It's not about you.
We talk about it a lot at 72andSunny, and we talk a lot about growth and how you grow people. Like, I think the first thing is we've been doing how-tos with the creative department, and Tim Bateman, who actually also works on United, did it. And one of the key things that he was talking about how to work iteratively, because we work really iteratively, was that actually feedback is the best sign for your creative work. Like, if if someone has feedback on your work, it means they liked your idea and they found something in it that they wanted to iterate on and build off of so that the idea can continue to live. Like actually the worst part of a creative review is if you don't get any feedback, because it means that nothing actually really landed, which is just like a good lesson to learn. And then another thing we talk a lot about is that actually like kindness is not the same thing as niceness. Like you can have a culture of niceness, and that actually means that you aren't honest with each other and that you're just doing something to be nice to someone. But actually sometimes the kindest thing to do is to point out a blind spot or to push the work into a better direction. It means that like the next time we do out of home or do a film about pilots or whichever new project we have, like we will be better and the work will be better because of it. And that's what being hard on the work and kind to each other means. And it also translates into our relationship, I'm sure, Meg, you want to talk about. Like we come at things from a place of high expectations, like creative excellence across the board, and also like kindness in the form of radical honesty and partnership.
And no ego. I think that's the other piece too, is like there's no ego. We've sort of checked that at the door from the beginning of the relationship. And so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where the idea started or who built on it or who actually like chose that piece of the film and, edited that word in the script. Like we actually sit collaboratively in Google Docs and write together, which I know is like super tactical and feels small, but it's so valuable and important to the work, I think, and to our relationship.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing more and more in the industry that there's not just creatives on the agency side, but creatives on the client side, and like even talking about it like agency client seems like maybe
it's just
not
partners.
We're just partners, and we have the same goal. Like I love working on the United business, just like Meg loves working at United, and we have the same goals, and we both understand the business of United and just want to make the best thing possible. Like we did a Super Bowl, we did several Super Bowl commercials.
We wrote 27 scripts.
We did. We wrote 27 scripts. It was actually really cool. I won't get too much into the idea, but we like, do you want to explain how this? Yeah. We hired Kyle Chandler, who's a coach from Friday Night Lights, and he basically gave a motivational talk to each different hub market that United flies out of, telling them to book Super Bowl tickets for next year because they didn't make it to the game this year, just really so hard on their team. But we wrote iteration after iteration. We all worked on it together. We did like several live working sessions where, like anonymous geckos were typing in Word documents. And the work ended up being like really beautiful and interesting and so much better along the way. Like there's Mike, who's on the United team, is like a deep wealth of sports knowledge and takes some writers from 72, and Meg's a great writer. And, like we put Rhapsody in Blue on the end of it. That's Meg's idea. It doesn't really matter where the idea comes from. Yeah. Like we're all in this kind of messy soup together, trying to figure out how you can get the best thing out there at the end of the day. And it's truly like better because we come at it from a place of we're all in this together.
You must be doing something though to make people feel safe if they don't care about who gets the credit. Because I find in environments when they care about who gets the credit, it's because they're posturing because they don't feel safe. Yeah. For or insecure or blame their parents, blah blah blah. But I do feel like there must be something that feels very safe in this relationship that allows you guys to not care about failing, not care about winning, like not care about who came up with the idea. Is there like anything in that in particular that you do to help them feel safe to give ideas?
I was just struck by this and thinking about, as we came out of the pandemic and we RFP'd the business, and do you remember we were on the rooftop when, we sort of said, okay, 72, you won the business. And the reason for me, one of the big reasons was like, yes, the work was beautiful, but it just felt like family. And I know this sounds so cheesy sometimes in like this really jaded industry, but it just felt like we were walking into like this warm embrace of family. And I think that was it from the very beginning. We just had that foundation. And so we are honest with each other. It doesn't always work. I mean, it's like, it's hard, right? Like we can sit up here and be like, oh, it's beautiful. And we check our ego at the door. No. Well, like that, it's not always easy. And we have really hard conversations and they can be painful. But at the end of the day, it comes from a place of mutual respect and kindness and admiration for what we both bring to the work. And so you can have those really difficult conversations.
I think it's so interesting that during the pandemic, we almost told ourselves, oh, we could do this over Zoom. We could figure this out over Zoom. But you really, like all day, there's been a lot of agencies and partners up here, and that chemistry and that relationship is really hard to get to just over Zoom. Right? I mean, so it's just so interesting that we tell ourselves things we need to survive, but then now that we're sort of out of it, I just feel like all day we've kind of heard that consistent theme from a lot of partners up here is like, it's just got to work. And sometimes there's explainable parts and sometimes there's unexplainable parts. Maybe, I don't know how much time we have left, but I did want to maybe we end on this idea of the third campaign that I feel like I put in our prep doc, the Good Leads
Good
the
leads
Way.
the way, yeah.
And so I feel that feels super real and interesting too. So I was maybe if you guys could dig into that.
Yeah. So that was our brand campaign that 72 came up with. That was the first one that United had done in over a decade. You know, we had to move away from the uncle who had never tried sushi. And I think that in and of itself was a really bold, it's a bold line and it's a really bold campaign for an airline to make, right? Like airlines are constantly in the news for things that are not great. And so to come out and say we are a brand and an airline where good leads the way, like I remember launching that, sort of white knuckling it, because it's really easy to co-opt like bad leads the way. Thanks, United, my flight's delayed. And that hasn't happened, which I think goes back to what I was talking about during the pandemic. We made all of these really interesting business moves that helped transform the customer experience. And the other piece that we wanted to do with this campaign was hero our employees. So we have 100,000 employees at United. Our frontline employees are, you know, our flight attendants and our pilots and our gate agents, ramp service employees. They are the best brand ambassadors that we have. So you have a good experience with one of them on your flight. You are now a United loyalist. You have a bad experience. You're going to feel very differently about flying us, no matter if we were on time or if you got a great price. And so a huge piece of what this campaign was to do was to hero our employees and make them the like hero characters of this story, so that they in turn could feel a lot of pride for working for this airline. And so I would say heroing the employees, sort of taking a risk on the line, good leads the way, and really living up to that. And then the other piece was not glamorizing travel. I think we were very intentional. You know, in our anthem spot, we talked about setbacks and you showed like a snowy tarmac because that's just the reality of travel. And so we're really intentional about making sure that it wasn't all wanderlusty and daydreamy when we launched this. I don't know what else you want to say about Good Leads the Way.
It was also like a really interesting time to launch a brand campaign. Like double down on everything you said. One of our other partners is the NFL, and we have a phrase that we use for how we treat the athletes on the NFL, which is helmets off. And it's similar because, you know, you interface with the athletes with their helmets on. And this is the same with United. Like you might interface with a pilot or a flight attendant, but we treated like the guys with the wands in the same way. And you know, the woman who puts your bag in and makes sure that it's going to be there when your destination, when you arrive at your destination, and really treating the United employees in that same way, because they're the heart and soul and like the spirit of Good Leads the Way. When you have a line like that that's so earnest, you have to, like showing the people who believe in it and live it every day, I think makes a really big difference. I walked through the LAX terminal and saw all these United employees whose names I know. I think another thing was like during the RFP process, 72andSunny, I think, was the only agency that went around and interviewed all the United employees, not just the clients, but the United employees who, you know, and they have such an amazing employee culture. Like it's incredible. We go to Earnings Live, which is a sort of closed door talk that Scott Kirby and some executives at United give about what's going on with the business, and 72andSunny attends that like we are United employees, and you get to see someone will stand up and go, I've been a flight attendant for 25 years flying out of Chicago, and you get to like hear their love and their experience for the airline, and you know it's always like an eye-opening learning experience for me. The other thing I'll add is just, you know, coming out of pandemic, like airlines travel in general, like just 90% of flights were grounded. Like people didn't know if there was going to be travel anymore. Like it was an industry in crisis, which is the perfect time. Like, as we know, pressure makes diamonds. Like United Airlines was fearless in this like really good claim about being a force for good in the world, and they were also fearless in the way that we came out with this brand campaign. I think it was early 2022. We had to make a decision in 2021 whether we're going to film it with masks on or masks off. You know, it's like, and to look back at it now, you're like, of course we were going to go masks off. but yeah, you didn't know, and so to put a stake in the ground in the middle of a pandemic to say we're going to be an airline that's not just going to survive this, but do it in a way that's better for our customers and for the planet with sustainability and the people that work here and for diversity and all of these other tenets is just like a pretty brave and cool thing, and it's working out.
Yeehaw.
No, truly. I mean, Meg might know, but United has raised in rankings on over the past 3 to 4 years. They were, I think, right below Lizzo on the top 10.
In 2022.
In 2022. Yeah.
2022 Lizzo.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm still Team Lizzo. Thank you guys. I'm still Team Lizzo. Thank you guys so much. So prepping for this, I saw great work, but it was so much fun to understand the process behind the great work. So I really appreciate it. Thanks, Brand Innovators, for this.
Yeah, thank
have
you.
a good afternoon, everyone.